Good morning, boys and girls, colleagues, special guests, and honored veterans. I warmly welcome you to Martin Luther King's 7th Annual Veterans Day program. 7th Annual. I can't believe I've been doing it for 7 years. I'm proud to be standing before you again today as the facilitator of this very special program. The many men and women you see before you are just a few of our country's most courageous and heroic citizens. When I look into the eyes of these brave men and women, I ask myself, what can I do to let them know how much I appreciate the sacrifices they have made for me? Well, this program is just a small token of my gratitude and appreciation and undying devotion to them, the men and women who sacrificed everything to make this world a safer place for the rest of us. To them, I dedicate this program. Please stand for the presentation of the colors. Silent. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Josiah? Boys and girls, silent please.
I know many of you have never seen a color guard come to a school before. I want to thank Rutgers ROTC for coming and presenting our colors to us. Just a learning lesson for you. When you see our flag go by, it is important that you remain quiet and be very still. But I want to thank you because you did a terrific job for your first time. I also, you may have a seat. I also want to bring up our blue lion so he can give everybody 3 roars to set off our celebration. Is that okay?
All right, let's give 3 roars for the veterans. 1, 2, 3. And all right, let's give 3 roars to Josiah. 1, 2, 3.
I'd like to ask us for a moment of silent reflection for our active duty servicemen and women. Please bow your heads for a moment of silence. Thank you. Next, we'll have Anant Gupta, Student Council President, with a reading, What is Veterans Day?
What is Veterans Day? Originally called Armistice Day, Veterans Day was first celebrated in 1938 to honor the soldiers that served in World War I. November 11th was picked as the date because the war ended at 11 a.m. on the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. In 1954, after the United States had been involved in 2 additional wars, World War II and the Korean War, the holiday was renamed Veterans Day to honor the brave soldiers that fought in all the 3 wars. No matter what it is called, the reason for observing the day is the same: to show gratitude to the brave men and women who sacrificed everything to make this world a safer place for the rest of us. To this day, Veterans Day continues to be observed on November 11th, no matter what day of the week it falls on. This preserves the historical significance of the date and also focuses on the importance of Veterans Day. After all, if it wasn't for our veterans, we would not have the freedom we have today. I ask everyone to take a moment to remember what our military has done for us and to remember those that are still fighting. Thank you.
Thank you, Anant. Ms. Beth.
For the
take a moment to introduce our honored veterans in attendance today. Veterans, when you hear your name, if you would please just raise your hand to be recognized by the children. Boys and girls, please hold your applause to the end. Mr. Ben Franco, U.S. Army, Infantry at Normandy, World War II. John Zazula, U.S. Army. John Ahern, U.S. Air Corps. Daniel David, U.S. Army. Jim Godfrey, U.S. Army. Frederick Willie Meisenest, U.S. Army and Air Force. Peter Limprakis, U.S. Army. Charles Chuck Pender, U.S. Air Force. Lorraine Hotshine, U.S. Army. Tim Bretyansky, U.S. Navy, grandfather of Carrie Ann. Christiane. Frank Alec, commander of Post 3117, New Jersey Veterans of Foreign Affairs. Zachariah Walters, Air Force. Sam Garudo, Marine Corps, Korea. Fred Battaglia, Army National Guard, father of Mrs. Sherry Lebonsky. And Mr. Ken Durkin, U.S. Army. Did I miss anyone? Did I miss anyone? Next, we hear a poem, The Noble and the Brave, read by Student Council Vice President Krish Parikh.
The Noble and the Brave. The Noble and the Brave by John Fuchs. When America had an urgent need, these brave ones raised a hand. No hesitation held them back. They were proud to take a stand. They left their friends and family. They gave up normal life. To serve their country and their God, they plowed into strife. They fought for freedom and for peace on strange and foreign shores. Some lost new friends, some lost their lives in long and brutal wars. Other veterans answered a call to support the ones who fought. Their country had requirements for the essential skill they bought. If we salute every one of them, the noble and the brave, the ones still with us here today, and the ones who rest in the grave. So here's to our country's heroes. They're a cut above the rest. They give the honor that is due to our country's very best.
Thank you. Now we have a special presentation by the kindergarten classes of Martin Luther King School. They're going to be singing You're a Grand Old Flag. You're a As I was reflecting and thinking about the honored guests that were coming today, I wanted to reach back into our own Martin Luther King family, and I sent out an email asking if anyone had veterans or active duty service men and women in their families, and you would be amazed at how many of us do. So I'd like to give a quick shout out to our family and friends. A few of these are currently serving. Mr. Herman Appling, U.S. Marine Corps, World War II, grandfather of Mrs. Cheryl Jackson. Mr. Herman Appling Jr., U.S. Army, Korea, uncle of Mrs. Cheryl Jackson. Ronald Jackson, U.S. Navy, Korea, father of Mrs. Cheryl Jackson. John Tilp, U.S. Army, World War II, father of Mrs. Ziolkowski. Chuck Ziolkowski, U.S. Army, Vietnam, husband of Mrs. Ziolkowski. Joseph Tafaro, U.S. Navy, peacetime, uncle of Mr. Montagna. Joseph Montagna, U.S. Army, World War II, great uncle of Mr. Montagna. John Matuza, U.S. Army, World War II, great uncle of Mr. Montagna. He comes from quite a patriotic family. Another John Matuza, U.S. Army, Vietnam, another uncle of Mr. Montagna. Edward Marzella, U.S. Army, Korea, uncle of Mr. Montagna. Mr. Bryant, I know you're shocked, I was too. Mr. Brian Mayrose, U.S. Army, active duty, brother-in-law of Mr. Montagna. Next, excuse me.
Let me hand you that. Boys and girls, I'd like you to really listen because you're going to see how many of us have been touched by veterans in our lives. So if you can wait for the 3 roars until the end, I'd really appreciate it, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilton. Eric Vogel, U.S. Army, World War II, father of Ms. Vogel. Boys and girls, please hold your reaction to the very end. Ryan Gray, U.S. Air Force, nephew of Ms. Vogel. George K. Crawford, U.S. Navy, Vietnam, father of Mrs. Fava. Bernard Bellatier, U.S. Army, World War II, prisoner of war, grandfather of Ms. Milton. Stanley Planis, U.S. Marine Corps, World War II, grandfather of Mrs. Halkiadakis. Gaetano Squillis, U.S. Marine Corps, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, father-in-law of Mrs. Squillis. Guy Squillis Sr., U.S. Army, husband of Mrs. Squillis. Neil Wilton, U.S. Marine Corps, Iraqi War, son of Mrs. Wilton. Arthur Wilton, U.S. Marine Corps, First Iraqi Conflict, Somalia, Bosnia, son of Mrs. Wilton. Stephen Sabo, U.S. Navy, Vietnam, brother of Mrs. Cohen. Edward Sabo, U.S. Navy, World War II, father of Mrs. Cohen. Sam Garudo, U.S. Marine Corps, Korea, family friend of Mrs. Lebonsky. Fred Battaglia, U.S. Army National Guard, Vietnam, father of Mrs. Lebonsky. Jack Fisher, U.S. Army, World War II, and survivor of the Bataan Death March, grandfather of Mrs. Thompson. Ernest Wolver, U.S. Navy, World War II, grandfather of Mrs. Thompson. Matthew Kelly, U.S. Army, World War II, grandfather of Mrs. Adiat. James Voorhees, U.S. Army, Vietnam, father of Mrs. Adiat. Sarah Adiat, U.S. Navy, actively serving, daughter, Mrs. Adiat. Norman Cooper, U.S. Army, Korea, father of Mrs. Campione. Salvador Campione, U.S. Army, Korea, father-in-law of Mrs. Campione. Joseph Renda, U.S. Army, World War II, my father-in-law. John Goslick, U.S. Army, World War II, my father. Joseph Fox, World War II, father of Mrs. Wilton. Arthur Wilton, World War II, father-in-law of Mrs. Wilton.
How about Jerry Shee's daughter?
And, right here. And a very special shout out to Heidi Shee. I'm so glad you're very excited over this year's program. And a very special shout out to Heidi Shee, daughter of Mr. Jerry Shee, Board of Education member. Heidi graduated from J.P. Stevens High School 2 years ago and a second-year cadet at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point.
Let's get 3 more. All our veterans. 1, 2, 3.
Next, I'd like to welcome Mr. Frank Alec, Commander of the VFW Post 3117.
Thank you, Mrs. Brenda. From all of us veterans to all you little people out there that give us this wonderful program, we say thank you. And I salute you, and I salute Mrs. Renda for putting this wonderful program together, and Mrs. Wilton, the principal of your school, for allowing this. Thank you all.
That's fine. Next, we have a reading from our Student Council Secretary, Jennifer Dwart, 20 Ways to Thank a Veteran. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls,
Many of you may be asking, what can I do to say thank you to a veteran? Well, here are a few simple things you and your family can do. Are you a knitter or a crocheter? You can make a scarf for the cold winters that are ahead. You can donate them at a local VFW for a veteran that may need them. You can also listen to their stories with interest. If they are a war veteran, they have seen things that you will never see. Listen and learn from their stories. Do you bake? You can make an apple pie or another specialty of yours and bring it over to a neighbor that is a veteran. And also bring a box of ice cream. Did you know November is also Military Family Month? If you don't, you can also thank their family. You don't have to just thank the veteran. Number 5. Nearly 40% of our veteran population is 65 or older. Give a veteran your phone number and ask them to call if they need help around the house. Make a note to call them this winter to see what they need. Number 6. You can also paint a picture or write a letter to a veteran. You can send it to a grandparent, parent, aunt, uncle, brother, or sister, or any relative that you know that is a veteran. Find out how you can help with the community service project to help the veterans. Remember veterans during other holidays, especially those without a family. Send a Thanksgiving card, Christmas card, or Valentine's card to either a vet that you know or through a VA hospital or VFW. Number 9, you can simply just pray for them and their families every day. Number 10, you can volunteer at a VA medical center. Number 11, fly our flag 365 days of the year. Number 12, offer to pick up their bill at a restaurant, bowling alley, ice cream stand, or anything. Wear an American flag on your clothing. It's a small way to say, I am proud of my country. Number 14, proudly display an I support the troops magnet on the bumper of your car. Number 15, attend a local parade or ceremony on Veterans Day. Number 16, if you meet a veteran on this Veterans Day or any day, just say thanks. They served you and this nation well. Give them a big smile as you walk by. Sometimes that is all that is needed. Number 18, when you hear the national anthem playing, stop what you are doing and think about the sacrifices of our U.S. military. Number 19, organize a group to write letters to veterans. Bring the letters and cards to a local nursing home to be delivered to their vets. Number 20, to truly honor our veterans, make the best of the opportunity the sacrifices of our fighting men and women have provided.
Love your country with passion and do what you can to make it a better place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.